Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up daily edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 9th of November 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. Let us now begin the discussion. Before we begin the discussion, here is an important announcement for all of you. Our mains Compass magazine on science and technology has been launched and it is there on our eLearn platform. Science and Technology Mains Compass contains comprehensive coverage of all important topics from January 2019 onwards. Since UPSC itself is the best guide to start with, this book is strictly curated and designed as per the previous year papers of UPSC as well as its syllabus. It will prepare you well in accordance to the need of the coming examination. You can go to our eLearn website, log in for free and click on the Science and Technology Compass to download the PDF free of cost. Before the discussion, here is a set of statements which you yourself have to find out whether they are true or false after listening to the discussion of today's DNS. USA is India's largest trading partner. USA is largest exporter of arms to India. CAATSA is a United States federal law that imposed sanctions on Iran, North Korea and Russia only. So far, India does not have a specific law to provide for liability in case of nuclear damages. The American Constitution is described as a truly federal constitution. It was ratified by 50 independent states. The position of the American president combines both the head of the state and head of the government into one. There is evidence showing that residues of Wolbachia infected insects in food products are harmful to humans. You will find the right answers to these statements towards the end of the discussion. So the first news article which we have taken today appears on page number 1. Joe Biden pledges to unite America. So we know that the next president of United States of America has been elected and he has become the president-elect of USA. Throughout the year, American presidential elections have made news, and there is a line in the syllabus of GS paper 2 which says comparison of the Indian constitutional scheme with that of other countries. Of course, there are only 4 to 5 important countries. The comparison with those constitutions are important from the perspective of UPSC examination. Not just that, in 2018, UPSC had asked, Indian and the USA are two large democracies. Examine the basic tenets on which the two political systems are based. So you can see that already UPSC has asked a question. In today's discussion, we are going to focus on the comparison of Indian and American constitution. This becomes the part of static syllabus, but it is important to understand the key differences between the two constitutions. And the 4 areas where the two constitutions, which are Indian Constitution and American Constitution, differ is with respect to the federalism, the system of government, amendment of the constitution and head of the state. Of course, there are other differences as well, but UPSC, if it asks questions on American and Indian constitution, is going to focus on these 4 key differences, and that is why it is important for us to understand these 4 differences not only from the perspective of mains examination but also for prelims examination. In this particular discussion, all the statements written in red color denote the features of American Constitution, whereas the sentences written in blue color are features of Indian Constitution. And we will begin the discussion by first understanding the simplest difference, that is of the length and the age of the Constitution. We know that American Constitution is the shortest constitutions of all the major governments of the states in the world, whereas Indian Constitution is one of the largest or the longest constitution. So that is just on the basic level, that is the primary difference. Now let us go into the nuances and try and understand how do they differ as far as the system of governance or the government is concerned. So the most basic difference between Indian and American Constitution is the system of the government. Now, before going into that, let us first quickly understand the parts of the government. We have a legislature which is primarily responsible for enactment of legislations, And then we have an executive body which has the primary responsibility of implementing these legislations. And then finally we have judiciary to regulate the function of both executive as well as legislature. So at the basic level, the relationship between legislature, executive and judiciary determines the system of the government. And American Constitution follows what is known as strict separation of power. The theory of separation of powers started with John Locke and became popular with Montesquieu. If you are not a political science student, you just need to know that these are people who were political theorists. And he stated that liberty cannot be protected unless and until there is a separation of power. Now what does that mean? That means legislature should be independent and autonomous of executive, and so should be executive, and judiciary should also be independent. So he advocated the separation of these three functions into three independent or autonomous chambers. Now, if you look at most of the democracies across the world, almost all the democratic constitutions ensure the separation of powers between executive and judiciary, legislature and judiciary. And so we are left with the relationship between legislature and executive to distinguish between the system of the government. And so what America does is that not only it has separated judiciary with executive and legislature, but it has also separated legislature with executive. So the people who become the part of the government are not allowed to become the part of the legislature, and similarly if you are a senator, you cannot participate in the government. And that is what is known as strict separation of power. Whereas if you consider the Indian system, we have independence of judiciary and executive, just like America's system, but we have a parliamentary form of government where the people who become the part of the executive or the government, for example the Council of Ministers, are mandated to be the part of the legislature. So our executive is derived from the legislature and our executive is accountable to the legislature, as opposed to American system where it's just the opposite. So the term of the legislature and executive in US is fixed. Executive cannot dissolve the lower house in America, whereas in India, Prime Minister has the power to dissolve the Lok Sabha, and head of the government in America is not a part of a Congress or Senate or House of Representatives, which are the two houses. Whereas in India, which is in blue color, separation of power is not strict because we have Council of Ministers who are lawmakers as well as executives at the same time. So to give you another example, in India, the Prime Minister, who is also the leader of the ruling party in the Parliament, who also heads the Council of Ministers, has the power to table a law and get it passed if they have majority in both the houses. But in America, a president cannot table a law or a legislation in either house of Congress so that it can be passed. That lawmaking is completely separated from executive. Neither president is accountable to Senate, nor the president derives its legitimacy from the membership of the Senate. So the basic difference of system of government is that USA follows presidential form of government, whereas India forms the parliamentary form of government. Next big difference between American and Indian constitution is that of federalism. Sorry for the bad voice quality in the last section of our video. Let us now move ahead and discuss the differences over federalism between India and US. So just like the system of the government, let us first understand the federalism, or what is federalism. Is having local governments or regional governments sufficient to call that particular nation a federalist nation? So a nation is categorized as federal when the constitution of that particular nation creates regional territories and the constitution gives them power and autonomy to act in various matters independently of the central government. And so if a constitution does that, that would become a federal country. So a lot of countries have regional governments, for example China, but the constitution does not create or protects those regional territories as well as their powers, and they are not federal. And so in that sense, both American as well as Indian constitution and system is a federal in nature. But There is a reason why we call America as a true federal nation or a true federal state, whereas India is called kind of asymmetrically federal tilted towards center. And when we will do the comparison, you will understand why we say so. And so, what kind of federations they are is made clear by the titles they adopt. If you see the name of USA, that is United States of America. So, that is a federation of various states, which is revealed by the name itself. Whereas if you read Article 1, it says India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. So that is just the basic level. But let us now look at the constitutional provisions to compare the two federations. If you look at India, India has a single constitution as well as a single system of citizenship throughout the country. You can be resident of any states or union territory. Irrespective of that, you just have one citizenship, that is Indian citizenship. Whereas in USA, each state has its own constitution as well as each state has its own citizenship. So United States follows a system of dual citizenship. So a person who is born and brought up in state of Nebraska in US is of course a citizen of USA but also a citizen of that particular state. And so that is like an assertion of regional autonomy and restatement of true federalist nature of America. Let us now look at the relationship between the federal government and the state governments. So in India, we know that the central government appoints the governor. The central government has some powers to apply the precedent rule and remove the state council of ministers. And also through the governor, the central government has the power to reserve many bills for its consideration. Whereas if you focus on the American system, the state governments are totally independent of the federal government. The US president and the state governors, who are the head of the states in US, do not have any direct organizational relationship like reporting to each other. United States president may be the most powerful person in the world but cannot remove a state governor or cannot interfere in any of the bills they pass or how they pass it as far as it belongs to their jurisdiction. And so that is why Indian constitution is called asymmetric constitution. Then if we talk about the representation of the states at the central level in the upper house, which is a unique feature of the federalist constitutions, be it America or India, like we have Rajya Sabha in India, we have Senate in America. So the membership of both these comes from the states. If you see, in the Senate of United States of America, each state gets the 2 seats because they believe that in a federation, all the states are equal. And they have equal concern at the central level when it comes to the rights of the states. Whereas if you see the Indian system, our representation in Rajya Sabha is dependent on the population of a particular state. Higher the population, higher is the representation, which in essence means that UP is not equivalent to Sikkim as a state, and in fact UP is more powerful than Sikkim, although as far as their status as a state is concerned they are equal. That is not the case with United States. The most important criteria to judge the power of the states is to check their ability to enact laws. If you see the American Constitution, there is only one list which has very few items, and that is a federal list. The list on which the Congress has power to make laws. And then there is nothing else. So, except for those few items, on anything and everything, states have power to make laws. Whereas if you see India, we have distributed all the subjects into 3 lists, and then we have provided mechanisms through which Parliament can legislate in the state matters also. Then the central enactments in concurrent list gets preference over state list, and then we have a residuary powers, all those items which are not written in the 7th schedule, which belongs to the central. Whereas if you see, all such powers belong to the state in case of USA. And so that is why USA is an indestructible union of indestructible states, whereas India is an indestructible union of destructible states. And that is because states, their areas, their names cannot be altered without the consent from that particular state legislature. That is not the case with India. Indian government can not only change the name, their territories, they can merge the 2 states or they can bifurcate states, but they can also change the status of a state from a state to a UT, as was seen just the last year, without the consent of the state. And that is why the quote, indestructible union of indestructible states, whereas indestructible union of destructible states. So that is with reference to the federalism. Now just let's quickly go over to the amendment of the constitution and its procedure and the head of the state, that is the president, and their key difference. So as far as the amendment of the constitution is concerned, it is a very important aspect of a federalism, because ultimately the federal relation is determined by the constitution, and the participation of the states in the amendment procedure determines the significance of the states in overall schemes of things. And so as far as American constitution is concerned, there are two ways in which the constitution can be amended. And first is when the amendment is proposed by the Congress and ratified by the states, and the second is that the amendment itself is proposed by the states, which indeed are ratified by another states. So you can see that in both the cases, if you have to amend the Constitution of America, you need the permission of states. Whereas in case of India, a constitutional amendment can only be proposed by the parliament and not by the states. And some portions of the Constitution of India can be amended without going through the states or without their approval itself. So you can see that this is also a reflection of asymmetrical federation which India follows. But nonetheless, this will come under the amendment procedure of the constitution. And finally, the key difference between the head of the state. Head of the state in both US and India is president. But since India follows the parliamentary form of government, the head of the state is president, but the actual power of the executive lies in the hands of prime minister. Whereas in case of United States of America, since it follows the presidential form of government, both the head of the state and head of the government is the same person, which is the president. There is a key difference between the manner in which the election of president is conducted. In America, the president is directly elected by the people of the country, whereas in India, the president is elected by the representatives which are elected by the people. So that is an indirect way of election of the president. There is a 2 terms limit on the number of times a person can become the president of USA, whereas there is no such limit in case of Indian constitution. A person can become president multiple times. So this whole discussion is to make you aware with respect to the important and the key differences between Indian and American constitution. Of course, there are differences which are more subtle, nuanced, but from the perspective of UPSC mains examination, given the kind of word limit we have, these are the 4 key differences in matters of federalism, system of government, amendment of the constitution, and head of the state, which is important for you to memorize. Let us now move on to the next discussion. The next article deals with again United States for obvious reasons, but this time the focus is on India-US relations. India and Biden appears on page number 8 as the column, which says that US policy may see more consistency without dependence on personalized summits. Now this whole column tries to assess the direction in which the relationship between India and US might move along in the coming 4 years during the first term of the presidency of Mr. Joe Biden. Now we know that under international relations section of paper GS2, bilateral relations are very important. Consider this, in 2018, UPSC had asked, Israel's relations with Israel have of late acquired a depth and diversity which cannot be rolled back, discuss. In 2019, UPSC had asked, the time has come for India and Japan to build a strong contemporary relationship, one involving global and strategic partnerships that will have a great significance for Asia and the world as a whole, comment. So you can see that almost every year, the bilateral relationship of India with an important country is one of the most probable topics which can be asked in mains examination. And similarly for mains 2020, India-US relations have become very important. And so we are going to discuss various pillars of bilateral relations, and we will see what are the convergence written in blue color and what are the divergences between India and US written in red colors. Now you should understand that the direction which relationship between two nations takes is dependent on various factors. Of course, role of leaders of the two nations are very, very important, and also the personal chemistry between the two leaders. But the two leaders cannot take two nations away if they have strong defense ties, economic ties, like-minded thinking on strategic matters, as well as on various other international matters. And so, although the personal approach of the leaders are very, very important, but the pillars on which the relationship between two nations is dependent also play a key role. And with the change of president in United States of America, these things are unlikely to change. Some things will change, and we will see how they will help or hurt India. There are certain things which you should understand. The convergence in the foreign policy of India and US is not just out of interest in international matters. We share common democratic values. Also, there is a strong people to people ties between the two nations. There are around 4 million people of Indian origin or Indian citizens residing currently in US, and election of Kamala Harris as the vice president is a reflection of that fact. And so we are not going to discuss the cultural as well as people to people relations, because currently what dominates the relationship is the matter of defense, economy, strategy and nuclear power. And let us go into them one by one. So the convergence of the interests between India and US are written in blue color on the right hand side. And so in the past few decades, the strengthening of the relationship between India and US is indicated by the increasing role the arms import from US is playing into India's defense policy. America has become second largest arms supplier to India. Not only that, just last week we have concluded 4 sets of foundational agreements with United States of America. And conclusion of these 4 sets of foundational agreements like COMCASA, LIMUA, BECA and ISA have increased the depth of the defense ties with America. But that is not to suggest that there is no issue as far as defense ties are concerned. India has always been wary of arms sale to Pakistan. Not just the arms sale, but very high-end technology is often sold to Pakistan by American companies, and that has always been a cause of concern, and the best example would be the F-16 fighter jets. After defense ties, if we analyze our economic relations, it is growing at a very, very rapid pace. USA is India's largest trading partner. The bilateral trade in goods and services has grown by more than 10% per annum over the past 2 years to reach $142 billion in 2018. So that is a very, very big demonstration of the good economic ties with America. We know that American firms are already a major job creator in our country, especially in services sector. Not just that, the investment by Indian firms and companies are increasing in USA. And so we can say that the economic intermingling of India and United States is mutual and it is from both the sides. But that is not to suggest that there are no issues. Recently, in his only term as president, Mr. Trump has left no stone unturned to designate India as a tariff king. The import barriers imposed by our country has always been a problem for America, and they have always opposed any such kind of barrier, especially on American imports. We know that earlier India used to get certain privileges as far as its exports to USA is concerned, but last year India was removed from generalized system of preferences status by America. Now this removal has created a big trouble for Indian exports to US, because India was the largest beneficiary of GSP, because over 1/10 of US goods imports from India entered duty free under this particular program, and GSP removal has reinstated the American import duties on Indian exports, and it has put our MSME sector and handicraft sector under a lot of pressure. Then from time to time, United States Trade Representative Office or USTR comes up with Section 301 investigations against India. Most recently, the investigation against India was started for imposing digital services taxes that may affect American companies. Earlier, Section 301 investigations have come up due to lack of enforcement of intellectual property rights by our country. Then various kinds of subsidies agricultural subsidies, manufacturing subsidies have been challenged from time to time by US at WTO. And so these issues are still unresolved. There is no indication as to where Mr. Joe Biden is going to move on these matters, but since the corporate lobby not only funds the elections but also employs a lot of people, and so it would be unfair to expect that there will be a U-turn on these matters. Let us now look at the strategic aspect of the relationship of India and US. So first and foremost is that America has openly supported India's entry in international organization, whether it is regarding UNSC reforms or it is about entry into nuclear supplier group. America has openly supported India. So that shows a kind of convergence. Also, not only that, both countries have become more vocal in their support for freedom of navigation, including in the South China Sea. They both have concerns and big concerns about China's Belt and Road Initiative and share similar views about free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Not only that, India is seen as a pillar of America's pivot to Asia policy. So there lies the strategic convergences. But the convergences end there. There are a lot of issues which demonstrate that they have to go a long way from here. First is India's still continuing and a big dependence on Russia, especially in matters of defense. We know that most of our defense weapons and communication systems are derived from Russia or earlier from Soviet Union. And so India continues to have a big dependence on Russia. Even now, if you see, India has placed order for S-400 missile systems even after the objections from US. And so there have been threats of sanctions under CAATSA, or Countering America's Adversary Through Sanctions Act, which is a United States federal law that imposes restrictions or sanctions on Iran, North Korea and Russia. But it also includes sanctions against countries that engage in significant transactions with these three nations. And so we know that India's transaction with Russia is very significant. And so we'll see how the future president of United States of America resolves this particular issue. The deteriorating relationship of America and Iran has caused big trouble for our country, and that is one of the bases of the divergences of the foreign policy between these two nations. America and Iran view each other as extremely hostile and as an adversary to each other, whereas India sees Iran as a partner in matters of Afghanistan and also most important source of energy, that is petroleum and gas. But due to American sanctions, India had to cut down its oil imports from Iran, and that is also one of the divergences or the differences between the approach of these two nations. Then we know that America is critically dependent on Pakistan for Afghanistan. If it wants to exit Afghanistan in a timely manner, America has to depend on Pakistan. Pakistan will not only provide the proper exit route but also controls Taliban. And so America needs the help of Pakistan in order to engage Taliban into talks and into peace deals. Until the time Americans are embroiled in Afghanistan, the dependence of America on Pakistan will continue, and hence the divergence between India and US also. Then in matters of nuclear energy, a nuclear deal was signed in 2008, which was a watershed moment in the bilateral relation of India and US. Despite the historic nuclear deal, civilian nuclear cooperation has not taken off. India entered into an agreement with an American firm Westinghouse to build 6 nuclear reactors on Indian soil has not moved ahead because India has enacted nuclear liability clause. Because India passed the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act in 2010, with its focus on setting liabilities on suppliers in case of a nuclear accident. And American companies want these nuclear liability laws to go before which they can invest. And so that has created a big issue in the matter of nuclear relation. Then there are some issues which do not have any convergence, and that deals with internal issues of India and the approach of United States of America on climate change. India generally adopts the policy of no interference in other countries' internal matters, and so it expects the same from other countries as well. But from time to time, various American institutions have commented on the status of religious freedoms, especially of minorities in our country, the recent abrogation of special status of Jammu and Kashmir, and conduct of NRC, and passage of Citizenship Amendment Act has also led to a lot of reports in America by various non-governmental organizations and also by government bodies, which has not gone down well with the government of India. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Joe Biden belongs to Democratic Party, which is left-leaning or liberal party in American political system, as opposed to Mr. Donald Trump, who belongs to a Republican Party, which is more of a conservative party. And so with the arrival of Mr. Joe Biden, it seems like these issues will get prominence. Also, in his election manifesto, Mr. Joe Biden had raised the issue of Jammu and Kashmir and rights of religious minorities in our country. But it still remains to be seen that after election, what he will do. We all know that US had withdrawn itself from the Paris climate deal. The early track record of Mr. Joe Biden shows that he is very serious on climate change, and the presidency of Joe Biden could see the coming back of America and adoption of Paris climate deal by that country. And so we should see some positive action in this direction. So all in all, the relationship between India and US is so multidimensional that a particular leader cannot in a single term change its direction. But the way or the pace in which the relationship moves in that particular direction can of course vary, and that is what remains to be seen. But if a question in the mains examination is asked on the analysis of the relationship of India and US relations, it is important to keep in mind the convergences as well as the divergences in various matters affecting the foreign policy. Let us now move on to the next news. This next article again deals with the international relations. Strategic comfort with Maldives appears on page number 9. Now, under Maldivian President Ibrahim Solih, bilateral cooperation, especially on the economic front, has become a kind of model that New Delhi can adopt to make Prime Minister Narendra Modi's neighborhood first policy a sustained success. This is what the author says. And so this also gives us an opportunity to revisit the relationship which India shares with that of Maldives. And so when we analyze any particular bilateral relation, it is important for us to understand the significance of that country with respect to India, what India has done for that country and what that country is doing for our country, and what are the concerns which plague the bilateral relations. Let us now start the discussion by understanding the significance of Maldives with respect to India. Now, first we will focus on the map and see the location of the Maldives with its capital at Malé. A lot of coral islands. It is an archipelago which is very close to the Indian waters. Now, being close to Indian waters is not sufficient enough reason for Maldives to become important for India. It is important because it is strategically located in Indian Ocean. The 1200 or so islands of Maldives lie next to key shipping lanes which ensure uninterrupted energy supplies to countries like China, Japan and India as well. So having good relations with Maldives is of critical importance for India in order to secure not only its energy security but also in future to be able to control the energy supplies to China. Now we all know India's preeminent position in South Asia and its image as net security provider in Indian Ocean region. And so it is very important for India to cooperate with Maldives in security and defense sector to live up to that image of net security provider. You might know that Maldives is also a member of SAARC. It is important for India to have Maldives on board to maintain its leadership in the region. Now, relations with Maldives, when they were not good in 2015 and 16, and hence it was the only country in the SAARC which was reluctant to follow India's call for boycott of SAARC summit in Pakistan after the Uri attack. And so you can easily see how important it is for India to keep Maldives on board always. Apart from that, India, especially the Kerala and Lakshadweep Islands, share close ethnic, linguistic and cultural ties with the people. The largest ethnic group is Dhivehin, the people who are native to the region of Maldive Islands comprising today's Republic of Maldives as well as island of Minicoy in Union Territory of Lakshadweep. They share same culture and speak the same language as well. And so that is why Maldives is very, very important for India. And so in the past, India has always lived up to the expectation and has come to help Maldives. For example, in 1998, when armed mercenaries attempted a coup against President Abdul Gayoom, India sent paratroopers and navy vessels and restored the legitimate leadership under Operation Cactus. In 2004, that was the year when the tsunami struck the Indian Ocean region, India had provided assistance to Maldives and had also supported it during the drinking crisis in 2014. During COVID-19 pandemic, India rushed $250 million aid in quick time. India has also rushed medical supplies from time to time, including food and water supplies. India also maintains a naval presence in Maldives on the behest of Maldives, that is on the request of the Maldives. In return, Maldives has always supported India's claim in major international forums and organizations, and the recently elected government has affirmed Maldives' India First policy, which was reciprocated by announcing an assistance package of around $1.4 billion by the Indian government. And so what could go wrong as far as India-Maldives relations are concerned? There are three main challenges or issues in our relationship. The first is, since last 2 decades, there is a continuous and gradual enhancement of Chinese presence on Maldivian soil. For example, Maldives signed first country-specific free trade agreement with China in 2017, thereby becoming China's second FTA in South Asia after Pakistan. You know you are on the wrong side when you are placed with Pakistan in anything. If you consider the overall foreign debt of Maldives, 70% of the foreign debt is owed to China. So you can say that Maldives is in a kind of debt trap with Chinese. Then there has been a growing trend of Chinese companies and individuals acquiring land in Maldives. The land grab is seen in excess of what East India Company had acquired during the colonial period in Maldives. And so this land grab has raised concern of Maldives being increasingly falling into an economic neo-colonial influence of China. Although the new government of President Solih has affirmed that Maldives will scrap the FTA with China and investigate all the Chinese land grabs in Maldives, but due to the debt trap in which the Maldives has already fallen, it seems impossible to do that right now. Then the term of last President Mr. Yamin was the worst phase of India-Maldives relations. He was not only a dictator, anti-democratic person who declared emergency in Maldives and halted the functioning of Maldives parliament and also arrested several opposition leaders, but was also extremely anti-India and pro-China. He solidified relations with China without taking India into confidence. Under President Yamin's regime, Malé had terminated the agreement it entered into with GMR, that is an Indian company for modernization of international airport. And various other actions which were taken by President Yamin are very, very difficult to reverse, and hence the hangover of the term of President Yamin is going to create concerns as far as India-Maldives relations are concerned. And the third important factor which is a cause of concern for India is the growing radicalization in Maldivian society. Now you would be surprised to know that the Maldives had become the country with the highest rate of foreign fighters per capita in the world. For its population, it sent the maximum number of terrorists to fight for Islamic State. And so, after the debacle or after the decimation of Islamic State, all these foreign fighters are now returning back into the country, and that has led to an apprehension by India that will lead to an increase in the influence of Islamic State, and hence it will help in boosting radicalization in that sense. The relations between India and Maldives are now in an upswing because the current government and the president are quite favorable to India. But just like the past, the things can change very drastically. And so India needs to build on the positive public image that it has to further cement the ties between India and Maldives. This next news appears on page number 3. No deaths due to dengue this year, says CM. In the prelims examination, a lot of questions in the past have been asked which expects you to know about various kinds of viral diseases. The questions on HIV, hepatitis B, And various other kinds of viral diseases have already been asked, including the Zika virus. And so, dengue is an important endemic disease, and there are few things which we should know. The first is some basic information regarding dengue virus, and then an important tool to fight against the dengue menace is Wolbachia bacteria and how it works. So, dengue is a virus, which is a mosquito-borne tropical disease caused by dengue virus. As a disease, symptoms typically begin 3 to 14 days after infection. These may include a high fever, headache, vomiting, muscle and joint pains, and a characteristic skin rash. So this is for the general awareness. It is important to be kept in mind is that it spreads mainly by female Aedes aegypti. And also, from the perspective of prelims examination, it is important to keep in mind that the vaccine against dengue has already been approved and is also commercially available in a number of countries. And in recent times, a new method to fight dengue and similarly other mosquito-borne viral disease has emerged, and which deals the utilization of Wolbachia bacteria. And it is based on the principle that when Aedes aegypti mosquitoes carry natural bacteria called Wolbachia, they reduce the mosquito's ability to transmit viruses like dengue, Zika, chikungunya and even yellow fever. So, this particular Wolbachia method is not just limited to the dengue fever. It is for all those viral diseases which are transmitted through female Aedes aegypti. Let us understand how Wolbachia works by first knowing that Wolbachia is a very common bacteria that occurs naturally in almost 60% of insect species, including some mosquitoes, fruit flies, butterflies as well. Now, Wolbachias, it is important to keep in mind, are totally safe for humans as well as for environment. So they don't cause any damage or any infection in humans. Now, Wolbachia live inside insect cells and are passed from one generation to the next through insect eggs. Now, Aedes aegypti as a mosquito species normally do not contain Wolbachia, and hence in a local population it is important for us to introduce Wolbachia into the local population of the mosquito. Now 5-6 years ago, it was discovered that when Aedes mosquito carry Wolbachia, the bacteria compete with viruses like dengue, Zika, chikungunya and yellow fever. This makes it harder for the virus to reproduce inside the mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes are much less likely to spread viruses from one person to another. This means that when Aedes aegypti mosquitoes carry natural Wolbachia bacteria, the transmission of the viral diseases is reduced. And so that is why a lot of countries have initiated a program to breed Wolbachia carrying mosquitoes, which are then released into areas affected by mosquito-borne viral diseases, which have seen considerable reduction in the amount of viral diseases. Now this next article, COVID-19 Climate and Carbon Neutrality, appears on page number 9 as an editorial. In this article, former Union Minister and present MP of Rajya Sabha Mr. Jairam Ramesh presents how human health is interlinked to environmental health. Keeping in mind this fact, he calls for India to make best use of COVID-19 economic disruptions as an opportunity to reset, recalibrate and rethink its shift towards an environmentally conscious green economy. Jairam Ramesh also suggests that plenty of evidence and scientific studies in recent times have suggested the fact that public health science and environmental science are the two sides of the same coin. So if you consider how increasing air pollution exacerbates the impact of COVID-19 as they both impact the lungs. Also, loss of biodiversity and ever-increasing human incursion into natural world have contributed heavily to the outbreak and spread of epidemic diseases, because the diseases unknown to humankind have been brought into the contact with humans, which was not the case earlier. And thus he calls for a need to understand the 3 E's, evolution, ecology and environment, as a key for identifying potential pandemics. He also cites a recent report of Ministry of Earth Science called Assessment of Climate Change over the Indian Region, which has emphasized the impacts of climate change on India. So he first demonstrates the global action to reduce the carbon neutrality by citing examples of various states and countries. For example, in September 2018, American state of California became the first to commit itself to carbon neutral by 2045. In 2019, European Union followed California's example, but the target would be 2050. China surprised everyone by declaring its goal for carbon neutrality by 2060. And just last week, Japan and South Korea have joined the club by setting a target of 2050 to become carbon neutral. Now, carbon neutrality in simple terms refers to a situation when a country's carbon emissions are equal to absorptions in carbon sink. So there are two ways to achieve carbon neutrality. Either we reduce our emissions or we increase our carbon sinks. For example, through afforestation or by increasing the wetlands. And so according to the author, India has to begin thinking very seriously in this regard. And currently India just has one commitment, and that is under Paris Climate Deal. India has committed to having 40% of our electricity generating capacity from non-fossil sources by 2030. And so according to the author, conscious efforts have to be made to achieve carbon neutrality. And so he suggests as a way forward, 70% of the infrastructure required in India by 2050 is still not built. And so if 70% of the infrastructure is still to be built, we can ensure that it is built in an ecologically sustainable manner and in a carbon neutral manner. Then he suggests that although rapid growth rate of GDP is very, very important, but now instead of gross in GDP, we should talk about green in GDP. And so India can and should show to the world how the measurement of economic growth can take place while taking into account both ecological pluses and minuses. So this is a very generalistic article emphasizing the need for India to adopt carbon neutrality.